Is going to get started in just like 10 more seconds. So perk up, get ready, close Facebook, focus just for a little bit, and get started. All right, Sarah, you ready? You good?
Hello. Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, cool. All right, let's do this.
Let's do it.
Hey, webinar people, webinar watchers and listeners from all over the world. Thanks for coming. This is the Programming for Non-Programmers Tuesday webinar. It's the first one we're doing, and I'm super excited to bring this to you because we're going to learn. They're going to learn how to speak geek, is what I've been saying. We're going to learn how to feel more confident talking with developers, potentially hiring a developer. Developers, they are all around us these days, and we need to become conversant with them. We will no longer allow them to be aliens. They are going to become, we're going to learn their language. That's what this is about. So I'm Chris Castiglione. I'm going to do a quick intro. We're going to go through some quick wins, and then we're going to have, on some learnings, and then we're going to have some Q&A at the end. So that's going to be the abbreviated schedule. So let me get into a quick intro so you guys know who I am. Check this out. That's me. My name is Chris. Everyone just calls me Chris Castig. And I have been a teacher for about 4 years now. I began teaching coding at General Assembly. I was the first teacher there, taught the first coding class they had. It was amazing. This one night we decided, hey, let's teach some HTML in New York City on a Tuesday night, and about 50 people showed up and oversold this room. And from there, it was really addicting and amazing to watch students build. People just had ideas, were able in like a week or two to like build their ideas, prototype, start businesses. I mean, it's like the coolest thing, and I can't believe. To be around that kind of energy is amazing. So that's where I started. From there, I went on to do, I taught at Columbia University. I taught this, the piece of the webinar that we're going to talk today, the bullet points were part of that winter semester long class that I taught there. So we're going to go through what those were in just a little bit. I also taught at Donors Choose, which is an amazing site for donating to schools in America, if you haven't seen it. I worked with them for a year. And American Express, New York Stock Exchange, a bunch of big companies I've consulted with on this topic of, if you have an idea, you want to bring together a team, you want to hire developers, maybe become a developer a little bit, how do you communicate that? How do you feel more confident? And that's what I do, and that's why I'm really happy to be here. So that's like, my story, the business part of it. I thought I'd also just share, because I'm really amped up on learning, and the new year just passed. So I just wanted to share a few things about what I've been learning. I learned last night how to play Sound of Silence on the piano. Sarah, thank you. Bought the sheet music for that. Appreciate it. And I've been taking my resolutions pretty seriously. I have this thing I want to show you guys. That I probably wouldn't even show my close friends because it's kind of embarrassing. But for some reason, I feel comfortable sharing it with a group of strangers on the internet. But this is my resolution calendar as of last night, so you can see all the things I've been working on. And I've been doing pretty good in marking those off. I just have about a year left to go. So that's my story. A few things I've been learning. I want to introduce Sarah, who is also on the webinar here. She's the co-MC, we could say, of this Get Down. She is going to be facilitating, helping me answer questions in the comments. There's comments, by the way, that you guys can ask questions throughout. And at the end, we'll do a Q&A, and the Sarah will help answer some of those as well. I'm going to introduce her in 1 second and give her a chance to say what she's been learning here at 1 month. But I just want to congrats her for joining the 1 month team 2 months ago as our Director of Communications. Sarah's amazing. She's written 300 articles for Fast Company, Huffington Post, Lifehacker. She has this amazing blog. And hello, Sarah. What's going on? How you feeling?
Hey, Chris. Well, I'm super stoked to be here, and thanks for that awesome intro. I am just actually one of the things I'm learning this year is coding. I'm learning like what does it mean to be a developer, and how do I talk with developers? And now that my job is related to communicating to all of you guys and understanding what you do, this class is actually I feel like it's perfect for me. So I'm really glad to be here.
Awesome. That's a great segue actually into the question of, like, should everybody learn to code? Because, in your previous work, you're a writer, you're a director of communications, which is, a lot of times reaching out to press, a lot of times working with, social media, getting stuff out there. As soon as you started at 1 month, have you felt a need to learn how to code? Has that, because a lot of our, like, at the office here, a lot of us know how to code in some level. How has that been part of your day? How has that felt for you?
Well, there's a couple of different levels to it because I need to know how to explain what you guys do. And then also, and so everything I'm doing has to have at least some facility and understanding, like what exactly do they spend their time doing and how do they do that and how did they build this? And then also, I'm always just inherently curious. Like, I want to learn to make that thing, and I want to put some email opt-in boxes over here, and I want to, like, all of these things that I want to learn, so I'm constantly coming over to each of my peers and colleagues and asking, like, so how did you build that? So how did you make that? How long does it take you? If I ask you to do this, is that a really crazy request? And sometimes Chris Oliver will look at me and be like, yes, that will take a lot of time.
That's a really great point. Yeah, I just saw an XKCD, this comic that I love, and it was the point of it was, when you're working with developers, something that seems really, really simple and something that's actually really impossible, it's hard to tell the difference. Like you ask your developer, hey, can you do this? And if you don't kind of know the basics of it, you may be asking something that's like super impossible or actually just a simple thing, and that can feel really like scary, because you're like, I don't want to bother him, I don't want to sound stupid, but I think if you just know, there's like a fundamental amount of coding that like everyone should know, and I think it helps clarify that, it helps give confidence,
Totally.
So
Exactly.
yeah, Sarah, if you have any questions, along the way of how this relates to your job, I think probably where you're sitting is where you at home is also sitting, everyone watching this, so that's awesome.
Awesome. And if anyone has any questions along the way, don't feel stupid. I have tons of questions, and I work at this company, so just pop them into the Twitter chat, and I will feed them over to Chris, and he will be here to answer your questions.
Well, that sounds great. So, Sarah, if things are going well, I'm going to just repeat the kind of like the outline for the next 45 minutes of what we're doing, and I'm going to jump right into it. Does that sound good with you?
Do it.
All right. Before that, I forgot to show my face, so I'm just going to give like an unveiling of like I'm actually here. I'm not a robot body. So let's just kind of show you guys here. I can start explaining. Is that working? Oh, there we go. Here I am. What's up, guys? So straight from New York here. Got my coffee. Cheers. Oh, and you're down there too. Hey, Sarah. All right, so let's get started. The quick outline for what we're doing is the first thing I am going to give you guys some quick wins, some ways that you can begin today to use vocabulary like a developer to feel a little more confident. So what those will be, we'll be looking at the front end and the back end. Some of these words we'll start explaining, as well as some of the web development process. And choosing the language. We'll kind of go into like little quick takeaways for each of those. After that, I'm going to introduce you guys to a class I'm launching. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, there's a class that I'm launching called Programming for Non-Programmers, and that's going to go deeper into that. And we're actually, I think, Sarah, we're going to give like a discount code after or something, some 48-hour thing where if any of you guys want, you can sign up ahead of time. Sarah will help you guys with that, and I believe I'll send an email out afterwards. That'll probably be the easiest way to do that. So I'll mention that at the end again and give you guys an open chance for Q&A. Any questions, any follow-up, anything goes, literally anything. I'm cool. Feel free. So that's kind of the rundown, 1, 2, 3. let's do it. Let's jump into this, guys. Um, so learning to program, right? Here's the way I think about it. You're not learning to code just for the sake of learning to code, right? You're learning to code because you want to solve a problem. Okay, so let's take it like to the 1,000 foot whatever level. Like, there's this problem, there's this thing, there's this pain point in your life, right? You're thinking, I have this idea for an iPhone app. You know, like if I could just, you know, put this idea together, I believe it will, you know, people will enjoy it. I believe I can make a business out of this, but I don't know where to get started, right? That can be difficult, right? But there's this problem. You're like, I need to make this app so that I can help people, or so that something can be brought into the world, right? That's one way to think about it. But this, at its core, there's this problem. For me, when I started about 10 years ago, 12 years ago now, coding, I never set out to be like, hey, I need to learn PHP or Ruby on Rails. I need to do this. I actually thought coding was kind of dorky. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but like around 2003, 2004, when I was getting started, like coding was not cool. I was in CS class, and there was like, it just was not cool, let's say, right? It was not a good place to like meet girls and have a social life, or, you know, whatever you want to be doing in college during those years. But what it was cool for was this problem that I just had in the back of my head. I needed a website, right? I needed a website because I was a music major, and I just wanted to get my music out there. I was in a band, and I thought, man, if I could just make, you know, my MP3, it sounds so silly now, but, you know, my MP3s live on the internet, then people could download it, and then people in California and record labels, and I'd go on tour, and I had this whole thing in my head, right? But you probably have that too. You probably have this idea that you're thinking, man, if I could just, you know, communicate my idea to like the hardware, I could, you know, get this thing into the world, right? And so for me, learning to code was that route. I took it upon myself. There wasn't boot camps or a lot of books back then like there is now. So I took a CS class, computer science, and I learned Java, which was one semester in, realized that's the wrong language to learn for what I wanted to do. I took a lot of dead ends along the way. That finally led me to learning, at the time, PHP, which was the easiest way to get this idea live. And it felt amazing, you know, to have that thing in the world, to like make that thing. And then soon after that, I was still still doing music, but then everyone was asking me, like, how do I learn? How do I build this thing? And that's when I was like, actually, teaching's pretty amazing. It became a passion of mine. And so that's what I want to like ask from you right now is, what is that thing that you want to make? Like, just like make a clear intention in your head. And you might not know what it is, but if you do, it's great to be honest, because there's so many things out there, so many ideas out there, you know, with coding and programming. But if you know, you could lean toward it. And for me, it was getting a website, getting my music on the internet. So think about that. What is the problem you're going to try to solve? That's what we're going to learn coding for. And think about like what you want to bring into the world with coding, not just to learn code, because it's going to be a lot more fun to do it that way. So that's what's up. I'm going to dive into, so that was me in 2004, and I'm going to dive into the different roles that are available and confusing when we talk about coding. So check this out, guys. There we go. You guys all see that? Here we go. So that was me. I was a webmaster. That was my first job, right? And it was pretty easy around 2004 to get a job as a developer because there weren't too many of them. And webmaster was this title that you'd get. It basically meant, I don't know, you have like the keys to the website or something ridiculous. And that's what I did. I designed the sites. I talked to the clients. I did restaurant websites in New York City. I would take the photography. I did like the Grand Central Oyster Bar and Beach A and all these sites, and I would put it together. And I did all the roles, and I hated my job, guys. To me, it was just like, I don't know. I felt really unconfident. Like I hadn't learned this stuff in school. I didn't do particularly well in computer science class. I taught myself how to do this stuff, and I was just thinking like, oh man, I don't feel confident about this. It's not super fun. I'm gonna, I don't know, go back to music, right? But then something changed. Something changed when I started to understand that there's more roles out there than just this do-it-yourself webmaster person. And what I learned, I remember it was 2005. I remember dig.com came live. The whole scene was set. And I was at a startup. We made our first hire. And the first hire we made was a web designer over here on the right. This web designer person. I was like, who are you, right? It was like this nascent moment of like discovery. I was like, you only design websites? You don't code? And he's like, no, I just design them. I'm like, cool, I could use you, right? And so I took the role of the web developer, right? And I didn't know it at the time, but there's a lot of differences in those roles, which we'll dive into in a bit, the specifics. But in general, I could then concentrate on the logic of the website, kind of like the left brain. That's the way I think about it. This left brain is the logic. It helps remembering dates. It helps remembering like semicolons at the end of code lines. I didn't have to worry about like what I felt at the time was like touchy-feely stuff. I didn't have to the designer stuff, the stuff where you're like, the client wants, this is like literally like the client wants the logo to be like, more maroon kind of red. I'm like, oh my God, just kill me. Like and maybe that's for you. That's great. I'm glad that you're there. If you're the designer, great, if you want to do that. But to me, focusing on the logic was such an empowering step, and is really why I'm here today, is that first hire when I understood the difference between these roles. Now here's where things get like historically confusing. It gets a little bit confusing because around 2007, 2008, there was a lot more people getting hired at this company, right? There was a front-end developer, a back-end developer, a user experience person, a visual designer, like all these people, right? And then I thought, whoa, now I have to make another decision. Like, who am I in this? I kind of came from this role of the webmaster. I wanted to be everyone, right? But I also wanted to like make help the company succeed and make an awesome product. And so, I had to focus and I had to understand the differences between these roles. Now, I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, hey, Chris, can the front end guy do the back end stuff, or is it like totally different, right? Well, yeah, to some degree, or not to some degree, like at a good company, at a successful company, the front-end person knows the back-end stuff. And we'll go into like the nitty-gritty details of what that means in a bit. But just understand there's overlap between all of these. It doesn't look that way when you look out into the Craigslists or, I mean, is anyone on Monster.com anymore? I don't know. But you know what I mean about Monster.com? Like you're looking for jobs and you're like, I am a user experience developer and I have 7 bullet points that define me. But that's not the way it really works in life. There's this kind of overlap between these jobs already. And that's what I want to help you guys understand so that you can feel more confident in communicating between the different roles and understanding what they are. And I'm just gonna go one level deeper here. Ready? Down below. Keep your eye there. And now there's all these other people. Why are you at my company? Do I need you? Do I need to become these? This gets really confusing. And I want to list them all out so we can kind of throw the cards on the table and discuss them. So this is the idea. I'm just going to kind of reiterate what I just said. It looks like we're in separate boxes. It looks like a developer is so different than a user experience designer. But here at 1 month, here at startups in New York City, our startup 1 month, we went through Y Combinator, the incubator in California. Here at a lot of those startups, a lot of successful companies, it's more like this. It's more like there's a common vocabulary between what a successful designer should know about development and what a developer should know about design. And those are the things I want to awaken you to. I mean, this is your first part of like just admitting that and just understanding that. So that sounds good. I'm debating whether I should open up for questions right now, but I think hold your questions to the end. You could maybe just jot it down on a piece of paper or whatever Evernote you have, and we'll do some questions at the end. Because at this point, I think what I want to do is go deeper into the development part. Yeah. Yep. I think that would help you guys to know the difference between front end and back end and what that means. And actually, Sarah just sent me a question. I see there's a question in the room, so let's just hit this one. Question is, do you need to be a hardcore math whiz to be good at back end? That's a really good one. I don't think that you need to be a hardcore math whiz. There's definitely a component of logic that you need to have. It's a little bit of chicken and egg, you know what I mean? By that I mean that, like, once you start developing, I feel like you start developing more logical skills. I would definitely attribute, I'm a logic nerd now, and I would definitely attribute the way that you learn to code, because it's so sequential, like, like think about the way that you got up today and made cereal. Like, there's a sequence in doing that, and you do it every day, but you don't really think about it, But coding makes it like visceral in a way. You have to put it on I don't want to say paper, but on the screen and run it, and pay attention to it. And so I think it makes you better at logic. I mean, all I can say is that I wasn't particularly great at math. I think it's more of a creative, logical way of approaching it. So don't put yourselves down. And let's go into, the next question is, what's the difference between front end and back end? And great question, because that's what I'm talking about. So let's dig into that. Ready? So front end developer or development, back end development. Front, back, front, back, front, back. What's the difference between the front and the back? I don't know. Well, I do know. I'm going to tell you, but maybe you don't know. So let's go into this here. Development. So the development process has these two seemingly separate responsibilities, right? There's the front end web developer. So the front end web development process looks at how things look to the user. This involves images, content, and structure. I'm going to show you guys some examples of what that means just after this slide, but just let that sink in a little bit, how things look, okay? And let's look over here on the right, the back-end development. The back-end developer, he or she is focused on how things work, and this involves the business logic and data. Don't look at number 3 yet. We're going to get to that in a second. Let's focus on 1 and 2. So the front end developer is looking at how things look to the user. The back end is how things work. The front end is looking at the image slideshow that's on your homepage. The back end developer is making sure those images are coming out of the database, that they're in order, stuff like that. We're going to look at examples. So with that in your head, right, that example, the languages we choose are going to be dictated by whether you're a front-end developer or back-end. The front-end development process involves 3 languages: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And yo, I got good news for you. There's only 3 languages. There's only ever going to be 3 languages. If you can remember those 3 languages, you can talk front-end to any front-end developer. You wouldn't walk up to a front-end developer and be like, yo, how's your Java? It doesn't really make sense. It's JavaScript, right? That's a whole, actually, I just opened a can of worms there. But understand that Java is a back-end language and JavaScript is a front-end language. Actually, the 2 words, although they sound similar, it's kind of like, what is it, like ham and hamster? They have the word ham in it. They mean nothing. They mean nothing alike, right? It just happens to have that part of the word in there. So just remember it as such, and don't get too bogged down. But if you remember HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it's pretty safe to say that every other language is a back-end language. It's pretty kind of safe little takeaway right there. All right. So that's a pretty good takeaway right there. Let's. I always feel like it's best to look at an example to kind of ground this, principle. So I want to show you guys the Zappos website. I had to check my shoes right now. I'm not wearing Zappos shoes at the moment, but sometimes I do because they're comfortable and they come in like 2 days. And you can return them if they don't fit so well. So I don't work for Zappos or anything. But it just seemed like a good site that has a lot of colors and that you might be familiar with. This is the Zappos site. I took the screenshot earlier today. And let's just talk about what parts of this site do you think are the front end and the back end? Actually, this might be a good chance if Sarah, are you there? Maybe I could ask you if we can kind of go back and forth. So I'm kind of curious what you see on the site, Sarah.
What I see on this site?
Yeah, so I'm going to quiz you right now.
Uh-oh, okay.
The front-end developer, right?
Yeah.
What was one of the responsibilities of the front-end developer?
How things look. How things look?
Yeah, how things look. So when we look at this site, what do you think would be part of the front end and what of the back end? Could you try to explain that based on the last slide?
So the look probably would be the aesthetic and maybe even the structure of it too, like how columns are organized and stuff like that. And then
that's awesome, yeah.
Like how it works is, what happens when I click into that search function, where it says shoes, bags, and clothes. Like, how do I actually give it a magical command and make something happen?
That's awesome. Exactly. And actually, we can go there right now. I can show you guys, because this probably looks a little more lively here if you guys can see this. Yeah, exactly. Things like how it looks, like this image, like the colors here, all this kind of stuff. This is all going to be the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, the front end. But things like when you start to do logic, when I start to search, and I'm like, do you have cowboy boots or a belt? All right, yeah, let's see what that even looks like. What's a cowboy belt look like? This process going on right here, it's like thinking. You could kind of think of it as like a brain. It's searching. Those kind of verbs, like logging in. All of these are going to be the back end components. Now, what you might notice is that they work together, right? It's not like you go to the front end of a site and then you go to the back end. They work together at the same time, which is why the front end developer and the back end developer work together at the same time. And furthermore, you might notice that you don't see the back end, right? When we just went and we did that simple search, right? You can see here I went from the home page, I clicked on something, maybe I added it to my cart, right? That's all you saw. So this is the takeaway right here. You only see the front end of a website, right? I just did some clicks. You didn't see the logic or the background. You just saw how it looked to the user. But what really happened when I clicked on that homepage link or when I did that search is in real time, in super quick time, the server or that website made a quick jump to some code, and then it spit out this cart. So it went up to this file. I made up a name for it, process.php. It's just the name. Usually, see how it says process.php? If it's written in PHP, it'll be like a .php file. Kind of like if you have an MP3, it's a .mp3 file, or a Word doc is a .doc file. The coding languages each end, for the most part, in .php, .rb for Ruby, etc., etc. So here, I made a click on the home page. It went to the back end. You didn't see it, and I like to think of this as like the brain of the site. It kind of made some decisions. Maybe it looked in the database. The database is where the text and some of the data, really, think of it as like a glorified Excel sheet, like that data that comes from. And it brought it back into through the brain processor, that PHP thing, and it drops it out so that you can see it in the cart. But that happens so quickly that you don't ever see that. Another example, so this is like another use case, like, I'm coming to Zappos, I'm clicking on the home page, and maybe I've never, I'm just going to actually illustrate with my mouse where I'm talking about here. So I'm coming here, and I'm like, I'm at the home page, and I'm like, hey, I've never been to Zappos, but I want to check out. Well, the first time I come here, this code is going to be like, hey, have you ever been here? And it's going to check in the database, and it's going to be like, nope, he's never been here. And then it's going to go, you can't purchase this yet. Nope, you have to go back and go to the registration page, right? So it's going to send me around, like down here on this level, it's sending me around the different pages, but I don't know why. I mean, that's all in the back end logic, you know. So that's one of the differences. That's how I think about the difference between the front end and the back end. Does that make sense, Sarah? Do you have any questions? Or we do a question from the audience if there's something out there.
Yeah. So one person was asking about how you differentiate between front-end developer and then the web designer.
That's a great question. So the front-end developer, or let's just say the developer in general, because it could be the front end or the back end. The front-end developer, actually, let's start before that. Actually, this has to do with the next slide, so I'm just gonna fling this into the next slide. So far, all we've talked about is development, all the way here at the end, right? This is development, making the code, making the user see images, making the logic. The truth is, there's a team of people that make this happen. It's kind of like a band, or like the Beatles or something like that, right? There's like 4 people that have to come together that make a website. It's not just the developer. So the question was, how does the designer and the developer, what's the difference, or how do they work together? In most projects, the designer will come up with the visual decisions or aesthetic. Generally, like in Photoshop, right? In Photoshop, the designer will make, hey, this banner is going to be red. We're going to have Gotham font, right? It's going to be this size. Those are the things the designer decides. Generally, the designer doesn't do the coding. Like I said, there's overlap. Like there'll be some handover in best practices, but the designer makes the aesthetic decisions. The developer then implements those by chopping them up and writing the code that really translates into those choices. That's kind of the abridged version of it, if that makes sense. Cool. All right. So finally, I just have one more thing I want to show you guys. On this topic of development and learning some best practices, and then we're going to dive into Q&A. Does that sound about right, Sarah? You feeling good?
Sounds awesome.
Sounds awesome. All right. So the last thing I want to talk to you guys about is, so far we've seen that there's a lot of different roles out there. It can be confusing. I mentioned that. And I'm starting to slim it down. I'm starting to say, with this slide, there's a lot of roles out there, but we can start to categorize them into 4 main roles, right? That's where we're going with this. Within this, I don't know, I keep thinking of like a band, like the Beatles, right? Within this like tribe of people all working together to solve a problem, to make a website or something, there's a choice that needs to be made. There's a lot of choices, which software do we use, who do we hire, and particularly which language do we choose, which can often be really confusing. This is something that you can learn, by coding a little bit, or by taking my class where I go deep into each of the languages. But I want to share with you guys something, the best way that I could describe it in 1 minute. I kind of gave myself that challenge, and I put together this video that I'm just going to play for you guys right now. I think this will help a lot. So give me 1 sec. I'm just going to cue this up and show you guys. So here we go.
The hardest part about learning programming.
Whoa, I'll just start that again. Ready? The hardest part about learning programming. Say it, Chris. Ready? Here you go.
The hardest part about learning programming is deciding which language to choose, because there's so many out there. And it makes it really, really hard for you. I'm going to break it down and make it pretty easy. So if you're making a website, you're making something that's going to be in a browser, it's going to be on the web, you're going to have to choose HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All 3 of them at the same time. You're going to choose HTML, CSS, and JavaScript plus Rails, and that's a website. You're going to choose HTML, CSS, and JavaScript plus Python, and that's a website. It's the 3 languages plus 1 backend language. That's a website. So now if you're trying to make something for a mobile device, well, you really only have 2 choices because they chose for you. What I mean is that Apple chose that you will use either Objective-C or Swift. They're basically pretty much the same programming language for all you care. So that's all you have to choose from. And Android, well, Google has chosen that you're going to use Java. So you either have Swift or Java. Those are your 2 choices, and really just get at it. There's a ton of other choices out there, and a bunch of different options that you could choose, but these are 99% of the answers that you're going to ever need. So go ahead and get started.
That was awesome. All right. All right. That was ridiculous. Hey, that's me. Okay, so that was my 1 minute challenge that I gave myself to try to explain that. I know it went a bit quick, but it's a good thing to leave you guys with because it's up on the web. I think, well, I can share that with you guys, or you can always just go to, there's a bunch of free videos I made at onemonth.com/learn. So that, again, that's onemonth.com/learn, where you can learn. That one is the basics here. So you could always come back to watch that. But I thought that would be a good kind of thing to leave you guys with as far as just some quick takeaways that we could knock out in this webinar. So check that out. And with that said, I want to wrap this up with a few closing points and then open it up for any questions that you guys have. So let me swing this back to me here. Whoa, hey. Yes. All right, so we're back, and we're back. Yeah. So in this, so far we talked about the difference between the front end and the back end. We talked about a lot of the different roles. I'm happy to go deeper into this in the Q&A, and I also have the Programming for Non-Programmers class here at 1 month that we will be launching on February 9th. Yeah, February 9th. So stay tuned. I'm going to put out a discount code for you guys afterwards, or Sarah will help with that. And you guys should be able to get a discount if you're interested in that. So check out for that. And you could also check out some of my other classes and the learning library at onemonth.com. I think that's everything.
So, Chris, I want to ask you a quick question. Can you give us an overview of what your class covers? Like, you just gave us a big taste of these different elements, but what do you like? What does your 4-week class cover? What will people learn?
Okay, cool. Good question. So the 4-week class, like I was mentioning before, that I taught this class at like Columbia University, and I brought it around the country. I brought it to LA and San Francisco and all these things. And whenever I would run it, like when we were kind of on the road running it, it would be a 16-hour in-person like intensive workshop. Was like the prime one that I did. And so what I wanted to do was take the best of those principles and bring it to 1 month here, so that you could learn like 15 minutes every day for 30 days. That's kind of our pace here. So part of that, the first week, what we're going to do, we're going to take all that, the best learnings, and the first week we'll look at the different roles that I highlighted kind of briefly. Here we just talked about the front end and the back end, but we'll go more into, how does a user experience designer talk to a developer? What do you need to know about UX for your project? Let's say you're like a business exec, or you're an entrepreneur, a future entrepreneur, and you need to know who to hire. You're going to understand more about just kind of like the bare basics of UX, design, information architecture, front end, back end. We'll go deeper into that so you have that understanding. That's the first week. The second week, we'll go through all the languages that you need to know for developing a site. We'll look at mobile as well, so that you can pick which site feels best to you. And then the third and fourth week is very project-driven. You're going to code in a little bit in a lot of languages, so you get a feel. The way I came up with that in my workshop is it's like dancing. And if you've ever taken a dance class, you can't really do it over over this intercom thing, right? It's like, hey, let's dance. This isn't making any sense. You need to actually do it. So I feel like we can keep talking and talking and talking, but about 2 weeks in, you got to dive in and feel what it feels like yourself. So we'll do some HTML coding, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, SQL. We'll do a bunch of different languages so that you know what it's like. And at the end, we'll do some projects on the business end to kind of ground, hey, if you're a developer or you're on a dev team, what are the best business practices for making your idea or communicating with your teams? Things like that would be, how do you hire? How do you write a good hiring application? How do you write out some specs and wireframe? What are the other things around the context of developing that you need to know? All in a month. So that's kind of a long answer, but good question. Thanks for asking, Sarah.
That's awesome. I have a ton of questions coming from people, so I want to send them your way.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah. So people are asking. The first question, this is from a little bit ago, but what language did you start with, and where do you recommend people start when they're learning languages?
Yeah, that's awesome. I started, like I said, I started in computer science class because to me, around I think it was 2003, it was like no one knew how to do this, so maybe my path was a little bit different, where I was just like, you take a computer science class, which was like not the answer. But the first useful thing I started to learn was just HTML. HTML, as you've seen, is like the foundation for learning all the other languages. So if you're going to make anything on the web, you're going to need to know it. Another thing to know is HTML and CSS are almost always or should be taught together. So I love Code Academy. I think there's some great stuff there. But you don't want to get like too deep into HTML. I'm just using them as an example because a lot of people know it without also doing the CSS. So if you start on their HTML route, do the CSS. I have a class on HTML and CSS here at 1 month, and there's a lot of classes out there. But I would start with HTML and CSS together. That's like your first foray into getting stuff live coding.
Awesome. I'm going to send you a harder question that I don't even quite understand the question, so tell me if I'm saying these things wrong. Seth Jones asks, do you have a preference when choosing between Python and Django and Ruby on Rails? Would you mind quickly touching on differences between the two and what you recommend for a starting point in learning either language or framework?
Okay, good question. So I think the question was specifically, do I have a preference between Django and Python? Is that what it was?
There's Python / Django and Ruby on Rails.
Good question. Good question. So that's what in the class I dive into to give a lot of context. There's not a really easy way to explain that in just one answer, because there's a lot of factors when considering which language to choose. Things like what is the community going to be like? What am I building is going to influence it. What resources are available? Kind of like, there's a lot of things to take in consideration. So I guess the short answer is there's not one answer. All of those are fine choices. It's going to depend who you are and where you are. But just to go a little further with that, I think, and this is what I show in the class, is that like it doesn't matter who you are or what you're working on. There's not really a wrong choice with those, at least. What I like to say is that there's a few like Ruby, Rails, Python, Django. There's a few that like you kind of can't go wrong with, and those that you mentioned are all ones you can't really go wrong with. So no matter who you were, you would be okay with those. But within that, maybe there's some intricacies that might suit you better, help you with scalability and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, good question. Thanks.
Okay, and for people like me, can you tell us what is Python?
Yeah, Python is a back-end programming language. I mentioned it briefly in that little video that I made. And Python, so when you're making a website, you choose, recap here, guys, HTML, CSS, and what? Java? No. JavaScript. Boom. Good one. Those three. And then you choose one backend language. So Python could be that backend language. Together it makes a website. So it's just a backend language that helps make the logic. Helps doing in the Zappos site I was showing, it helps to do the searching. It helps to do logging in, querying the database, and it works together to make a website. So it's a backend programming language. Cool. Any other questions?
Oh yeah, there's a couple more. Is a framework and a stack like LAMP the same thing?
Good question. And I'm just going to answer the question like specifically, and I apologize if people don't know the context of even what the question is. It's a little bit heavy, but yeah, a framework is the best I could describe this, with a 1-minute answer is a framework is a bunch of pre-written code that's out there for free, and it allows developers to code really quickly, right? So frameworks are awesome. Almost all developers use them, and once you kind of understand the basics of the languages, you want to use frameworks. Okay. A LAMP tech stack, what you're saying, takes a framework and a bunch of other things like servers and all this other stuff, and puts it together. It's kind of like a recipe for making a website. The good thing to know if you're watching and you're like confused a little bit is you don't really need to know this in terms of like it's good to know, but it's not day-to-day choices you make. You know, it's that's the best way to explain it. So if you're completely lost and you're like, this is way over my head, I would say that's fine. Just kind of start with the basics of what we learned today. But if you're on a bigger team, if you're doing like web ops or like server stuff, these things start, and it's good to know what it is more than day-to-day things. So hopefully that helps. Yeah, that was a big question.
That was a really specific and big question. Here's another one. How do we test and hire developers?
That's a tricky one. It reminds me of something that I did an interview with. I interviewed Paul Graham 2 years ago because he wrote this book, Hackers and Painters, which I love. I don't know if we have it here. It's amazing. And part of that is talking about the developer as this artist, right? It's beautiful. Just read the essay if you've never read it. It's online for free. There's a book that followed. But when we were talking about evaluating the developer, it's hard because there is a certain art and everybody writes code differently. And if you're not in that world, if you don't know the basics of what good code looks like or the principles, how are you able to make those choices? Like, how are you can't know, right? There's no way to know that without being it yourself. And so what we were talking about, kind of brainstorming in that meeting, was one of the best ways, if you have no idea, is either to educate yourself, get a mentor, educate yourself, or to hire like a confidant, someone who is a developer, who is a friend of yours, or you can hire on an hourly rate that can vet those people, because there's no way that you would know otherwise. So that's a tricky question. There's no like quick answer to that. But I would seriously consider hiring someone. That's what like a CTO does. Mm-hmm. Hire a CTO maybe, or somebody on an hourly basis to help you out. Yeah.
Okay, I'm checking the rest of these questions. Someone was asking if there's a high demand for front-end developers and front-end versus back-end, if you know if there's more of a demand for one.
If there's more of a demand for front-end versus back-end, is that the question? Yeah. I think back-end developers get paid more, you know, if that's, and back-end development is definitely more challenging. It depends. I mean, in general, that's true. Front-end to kind of like fight what I just said. Like the other side of it is, you know, if you're doing front-end stuff of how things look to the user, you could be making like really animated games or like crazy, beautiful, intricate interfaces, and that stuff is super challenging. I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, read anything by Paul Irish out there. He's a front-end developer he works at Google. He's like insane, right? Like just writes beautiful code, writes beautiful projects. So you could go deep down each one and make just as much money, and be just as in demand. In general, back-end developers make more money. And you know, I guess you're kind of asking for advice on maybe which one to choose if you were thinking about learning one. Learn a little bit of both, and if one really kind of like speaks to you, and like to me, front end is always been more exciting. I don't know, you know, just writing the scripts and making things happen. But just follow which one I think speaks most to you, and just go deep into it if that's what you're going to do. It's probably the best way to decide. So.
That's awesome. I think people are asking also which one has more marketability in a portfolio, and if they're going to get a job, where should they focus their energy? And I think you've said before that there's a lot of job opportunity for both, so it's a little bit of splitting hairs. But if you had an opinion, which one has more marketability?
I think it's harder if you're front end and you don't know any back end, right? I would consider myself a front end developer. I can make a site from. You want to have at least a little bit of that in your toolkit. So if you're front end and you don't know any back end, I think that's troublesome. I mean, definitely you'll find a job. Like there's still, but knowing even if you know all front end and a little back end, so you can kind of like communicate. That's what I've been talking about. You know, that idea. That's going to be valuable. Knowing a lot of back end is going to be valuable. I would just make sure that you don't only know front end. I mean, you could, but it's not as helpful as far as the job search goes.
That's really cool. So another question that's coming up, is there a position with tech companies where you're not required to know as much code? So if somebody who's just starting out and wants to learn more, where would they go to keep learning?
Is this like as an intern, do you think, or you know what I mean, or like a school or something?
I think it's people want to know, like, let's say you take this is a question I have too. Let's say you do a 2-month or a 3-month boot camp, or you're learning on your own on the side for 6 months. Like, can you then go straight into working, and do you have a job guaranteed, or what kinds of positions are open for you, and what does that look like?
I think I'm gonna give like a pretty candid feedback on this, and I think based on who you ask, it's gonna vary. I don't think you're ready to be hired as a junior developer even after a 3-month boot camp. I think some people can be, but I think that, and I'm speaking from experience, having taught the Rails boot camp at General Assembly, having hired about 4 people from Flatiron School and General Assembly. I think that's great, and it's a foundation. Let's say you did, a 2-3-month boot camp. I think you also then need at least 1 or 2 months of working experience to be like really a junior dev, to really be like a valuable junior dev. I mean, you'll get jobs, and so my best advice there would be do that. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad to go that route of the boot camp. But have some real-world experience in addition. So if that means taking an internship, taking a month after the boot camp, or whenever you're learning to actually make a few sites, that's what I look for. Because when I look at the projects coming out of the applicants from boot camps, they'll have made like 4 things, if they all made it within the context of the boot camp. It's always a little bit unsure which part they contributed to, or whether the teacher gave them templates, or and then they come into the job place here, at 1 month when we've hired them, and they're missing the workflow. A lot of the stuff that I've actually mentioned with they don't even know what a UX designer is. They don't know project workflow or project management. There's more in communicating to developers than just writing code, and that's what that's why I'm here today, and that's what I teach, is that idea of beyond the code, what do you need to be working on and stuff like that. So
Awesome.
Get some real work experience, and that will be huge.
So Chris, here's a great question for you. I love this question. If after attending a programming for non-programmer class and we decide that we want to become a programmer, where do we go from there?
Ooh, good question. So if you want to become, that's what I've been doing for a few years now. If you want to become a developer after taking programming for non-programmers, which I've had hundreds of students do, it's amazing, is I have other classes that I teach and that my co-founder Matan here at 1 Month teaches. I would recommend the 1 Month HTML class. Is a great kickstart. And actually, in programming for non-programmers, the cool thing about this class here at 1 Month is that we're going to do it's like a little a la carte from a few 1 month classes, so you kind of get your feet wet with just you'll get a little bit of HTML, a little bit of Rails, a little bit of SQL, and then you can kind of decide. But specifically, as I've recommended in this webinar, after programming for non-programmers, if you do the 1 month HTML class, which I teach, which is available right now, you can you'll make 3 projects, which is exciting. You'll make a landing page, you'll make a portfolio page, and you'll make a blog template, and you'll have those and actually those, everything that I did in my 10-week HTML, CSS, JavaScript bootcamp, the HTML, CSS part I put into this class. I found that, you look at those classes, those 3-month classes, and you're like, well, that's intense every day. And yo, that stuff definitely is really intense. But when you take out a lot of the like lunch breaks, and you take out a lot of the like other people asking questions and all that stuff, and don't get me wrong, there's definitely value to that, no doubt. But if you need a quick jump start at your own pace, you can take the best parts of that and do it in half the time. And that's what my class is. It's like a 1 month. It's just like a 1 month, make 3 projects and get to the nitty gritty of it. And that's where I start, at the HTML class, and then the Rails class, Anton's 1 month Rails, which is phenomenal. It's a great class. Those two would help you for sure. You'd have like 3 or 4 projects under your belt after that.
Awesome. So, Chris, we're at the top of the hour now, so we're going to start wrapping up. But I just want to make sure before people jump off that they know that you are giving everyone $100 off your upcoming class. So if people are on the webinar, and this isn't for anybody else, we don't really love doing sales at 1 month. We keep our prices pretty straightforward. But if you're on our webinar and you're listening to Chris and you think he's awesome and you really want to take his class, he's giving everybody $100 off. So that's a plug. We're going to send you the link in email, and we're going to post the link in the chat too, so you'll get it in a couple of hours, and we'll send out the webinar recording. And then this last question I want to make sure that we get to, which I think is so awesome because this speaks to the differentiation from around different classes. Somebody said, where do you get a mentor if you want to become a developer? How do you find one?
No, I don't know. That's a great question. It's so important. It's so important to have a mentor. And they, it's not something they just sell in Walmart. You have to. Man, I should write a blog post about that because I think it comes with you. I mean, I'll share with you. This is actually, Sarah. This is a great story that you don't even know. I've actually never told this story.
What?
So Christina, our designer here at 1 month on our team of 9, right? How I met Christina is an amazing story. Christina took my class at General Assembly. And after the class, it was like a weekend, like 10-hour. After the class, she came after and she said, actually, she emailed me. She was like, Chris, I love the class, I love what we built, but I don't want to lose my skills. And she was like, she wrote this, it was like beautiful. She was like, I just want to make sites. She's like, if you'll be my mentor, I would be so happy. We can work together. She's like, I'll work for free. Like, there was so much like dedication and determination in this email, and also having seen her work really hard for those 10 hours and know that she was committed, I was like, sure. And I had a project, a freelance project I was working on. I gave her some part of that to do. She killed it. Long story short, she now works at 1 month, which is crazy. So that's how I met Christina. And I think the highlights from that story. I don't have time right now actually for any more mentors. I do work with somebody already, but to reach out to other people is just to show your passion, show that you can work hard. I believe Tim Ferriss has written some really good things about how to find a mentor, and maybe I'll follow up with a blog post on that. That's a great, or I could add it to the class as well. That would actually be cool. But just show somebody you're passionate, work hard, and let it be said. Maybe put it on your Facebook. I'm looking for a coding mentor. Like, just say it aloud. Write it down every day, right? Do whatever you have to do to like make that a thing that you're. If you say it, it'll happen. That's a little bit like but it'll happen.
Well, that's the truth, actually. You and I have been talking about that offline.
It's a resolution. Yeah, right?
Yeah, we've been talking about how when you say things out loud, and also just to be clear and to be specific about the mentorship, that's one of the reasons why I think Chris and Tom started the classes in the first place. Because once you want to reach a ton of people and you can't meet with them all one-on-one, you have to do something like recording a video. And so it's